Okay, so in this video, I'm going to explain how to write the visual novel story, or basically how to plan the visual novel story of what you're writing, right? So I have been a writer for a visual novel story for like past 1 year. I've written actually two visual novels, right? So I've written two visual novels I have written, and like from what I have learned from that writing experience, I'm going to explain this in here. English is not my first language, so excuse the accent, and since English is not my first language, my speaking English is not that good, but I do write quite well written English. So this is basically kind of a guidelines on how to write a visual novel story. Okay, so let's go. Uh, so when you're writing a visual novel story, first what you have to do is you have to like make a plot. So the thing is, how will you make the plot, right? So there are 3 points you have to consider as in like when making a plot. The first point is that when a player finishes that visual novel, what should be the end feeling of that visual novel, right? It could be a shock, it could be, let's say, it could be immense longing, or it should be content. So what kind of end feeling you want for a visual novel, you have to decide before even making the plot. So yeah, these are the plot objectives basically, right? So these are the plot objectives. Now, whatever feeling you decide that a player should have after finishing your visual novel, that is the canon route or the main route, right? These are the canon route or the main route. As in, if even if the player passively selects all the choices, he will get to this ending. Now, once you decide this feeling, you could make divergent routes from this. Divergent routes, or the player makes choices and the story changes a bit, and a divergent route creates from there, right? So from there, like a different variation of that same main feeling occurs in that different divergent route, right? So it could be like a different polarity. Like if you have a good feeling on one set of choices, then you will have a bad feeling on another set of choices. So you can change the polarity, or you could even change the variations of the end feeling which you get in each route, right? Now the second thing which you have to consider is that for your canon route, for your main route, what should be the lesson you have learned, right? This is basically for the most part, it is basically a moral lesson you learn during the end of one route, right? Moral lessons, or sometimes a lesson of wisdom, right? So that should happen in the canon route or a main route. And when you diverge the main route from the two other routes, so if you divert it, it should have some another lesson, which a moral lesson or a lesson of wisdom a player should learn, right? Now, once you have got the idea of this, like what is the main route or the canon route, you have to decide like how many divergent routes should you have. Like if you're not in a jam, if you're not in a game jam, then you have to like decide like how many divergent routes you have. The more divergent routes you have, the more time it will take to actually flesh out the story. You also have to decide like how many main characters or the side characters you have. So uh, sometimes what happens is like when you decide how many main characters or the side characters you have in the main route, actually decides how much divergence you could have in a story. So the side characters and the main characters, when you have that main canon route, actually decides like diver how much divergence you could have in the visual novel story, right? So now let's see about no, that was all the plot generation part, right? Now let's look at what is the point of view, basically what is the narrative perspective, right? So basically the narrative perspective is something like and how you tell the story to the player or the reader, right? How you tell the story. So it defines like what is the distance and the relationship of the narrator with the characters, and also the setting and the events of the story. See, so whatever point of viewpoint you choose, this actually decides how this will pan out, right? And the narrative viewpoint basically shapes the reader's understanding of the story and how that story is presented or interpreted. So that is the viewpoint, right? Now, when deciding the viewpoint, which viewpoint you have to choose, you have to consider the perspective. So not perspective side, you have to consider the purpose of like what is the purpose of the story, right? So when shaping the perspective, like if you when you are shaping the perspective, the narrative viewpoint actually influences how readers will like perceive the characters, events, to themes and story, right? And then we have to consider like what is the how you are creating the engagement. Like different viewpoints actually present you different ways for the reader or the player to engage with the story, right? Like it could create sympathy, it could create empathy, suspense, surprise. These all factors actually depend on how was the viewpoint you have selected for the story. Okay. Now, another thing is that the viewpoint also like decides as in uh, how much in depth of the character development you go in, right? So certain viewpoints which you choose actually don't go into that in depth inner lives of the characters, while others gives you the freedom to do that. So those you have to consider as well, like that purpose you have to consider as well. And the last thing is like the controlling of the information, like how much information you have to like reveal while narrating the story. It actually depends on which type of narrative viewpoint you choose. So that is one of the things. These are the four purposes of like which you have to consider. These are the four purposes you have to consider as in which viewpoint you have to choose, which type of viewpoint you have to choose, basically. So that is one thing. So uh, if you are like, for example, if you are like creating a mystery, so having a third person viewpoint will not serve the purpose. So that is one of the things which you have to like understand, right? So you have to choose a proper viewpoint before like when you're writing a plot or when you're writing the story, right? Now, next is the viewpoints. So usually, what happens is like authors when they are starting to write a plot, they usually um, carefully select a narrative viewpoint which actually meets with their storytelling goals, and depending on which of the readers' desires they want to invoke from the player. So basically, as I said, like in the previous slide, I said like what is the end feeling you want for a visual novel story, right? Now, when choosing a viewpoint, that actually makes a lot of sense, as in like what end feeling which you have decided for the visual novel ending is actually coupled with what viewpoint you have chosen for the visual novel story. So what desires you want for a player to receive, that is how you like select the viewpoint. So there are different types of viewpoints in here. So we will look at the four main narrative viewpoints, and there are of course others, but these are the main four, right? So let's see. So the most basic one is the first person narration, right? The first person narration is like first person view. It is also called a first person view. So the first person view is like you're still telling a story from one of the characters' perspective, such as you will use pronouns such as I and my, and the first person uh, narrator also like gives out his feelings, as in you're living from that character's point of view, and you can say what his or her thoughts are, or what their feelings are, what their experiences are, you could say from the first person narration, right? So this narrative perspective offers the readers or the players the access to um, you know uh, the character's perspective of, like, they have this sense of intimacy and immediacy from that particular character, which first person perspective you're telling the story, right? So the next, you have to see like what are the advantages and disadvantages of this first person narrative. So when you are going with the first person narrative, right, you have a close connection with that character, with that narrative character in the story itself. So you have that first hand experience of like experiencing the world from their eyes, right? You have that it allows like in-depth exploration. So you have those in-depth exploration, as in like whatever thoughts that character has, whatever motivations those characters have, and whatever the inner conflicts which that character have while choosing those choices to form the story or to choose the routes, right? uh, it also like offers a unique voice and a style for like for engaging a player for a in-depth storytelling. So unique voice and style, as in like this actually gives you the freedom to not follow um, you know the textbook mode of like writing the story. So if a person has a southern accent, so you could use words of a southern accent in the narration. So this gives a like unique style and unique voice in storytelling. And then the last point of the advantage in here is that reader can empathize. Sorry, they can show empathy while experiencing these narrators' experiences. So the narrator is the character itself. So it uh, readers can show their empathy while going through the story from their eyes and from this viewpoint. Now, the disadvantage of this you know narrative viewpoint is that the first person narrative viewpoint is actually limiting on like readers understanding of the other characters and events. So because you're seeing the world from one of the characters, from the first person narrative viewpoint of one of the characters, you have very limited understanding, as in how the other characters feel and what happens to the other characters and other events that happen to the other characters when that main character is not present, right? So now the second point of what happens is like what the second disadvantage what happens is like in person narrators, the story which is presented to the player is actually unreliable and biased, because you are seeing the world, the reader is seeing the world from a character in the story. So like when you are living a life, you are biased, you are unreliable, depending on what character you have. So that way it is very difficult to like have a reliable or a non-biased information and the perspective of the story. So that is one of the limitations of having a first person narrative perspective. And now the third one is that if you are going with the first person perspective, first person perspective is that actually inhibits the ability to show external events, because as a first person narrator you can only recount events that has directly happened to that main character, who has witnessed that those events or that directly experienced those events. So that is the disadvantage of first person narrators or the person perspective, right? First person point of view, basically. So these are the disadvantages. Now, the examples of like first person narrative is like this. These are the two other examples in here. Like I never thought a place so small could feel so vast. Standing on the edge of the football field after everyone had gone home, I felt the weight of the upcoming graduation pressing down on me. The stands, empty and silent, had witnessed every triumph and failure over the past few years. Now they loomed like silent sentinels guarding those memories. So this is one of the examples of like first person perspective, or like first person view of the story. So you see how it is describing the main character's feelings and conflicts and everything. So now, this is the second one. As I stepped inside, memories flooded back with each groan of wooden floorboards. Dust motes danced in the silvers of light that penetrated the heavy curtains, casting a strange glow in the otherwise dim room. I walked slowly, my fingers grazing the faded wallpaper, once vibrant with floral pattern. So this is also like uh, first person perspective or first person view of the story. So it actually gives a lot of details on, as in like how the person is feeling, how the person is experiencing the world around him. Now, now if you want to like try this, if you want to try this, like how to write the first person perspective, like try you could try this in your way, like practice. This is a small task, like you can pause the video and like do this small task. So practice your creative writing and skills and demonstrate your understanding for the first person narrative viewpoint by extending the following story opening. So this is one of the tasks you could try out. So this is the text. I stare at the text message on my phone, my fingers hovering over the keyboard as I struggle to find the right words. My mind raced with what ifs and worst case scenarios, each more daunting than the last. Now you can now extend this thought process of this character and see how what you can come up with. So this is one of the exercises of like writing from the first person perspective, or the first person narrative viewpoint. Yeah. So now next is the second person. So now this one, what happens is that the narrator addresses to the reader directly using the second person pronoun such as you, right? So this is the second person perspective. Okay. So now while while reading the visual novels, the modern visual novels, you will see this second person narration most of the time. Actually, this is more common in like visual novels. So what happens is, in this narrative perspective, the reader is placed in the role of a protagonist, right? Experiencing events and whatever is happening in the story, they are experiencing it directly, right? Now, the second person narration, as I said before, that it is very common in visual novels, and it is often used in self-help texts like choose your own adventure visual novels or RPGs also. So, or even experimental or avant-garde fictions. It is used in those also. So yeah, second person perspective is very common in these type of stories and narrations. Okay. Now, what are the advantages of second person narration? Like, let's see. So the first advantage is that it directly involves the reader in the story, creating very strong immersion and engagement. So it engages the users directly, right? It also like creates a sense of immediacy. So like that sense of like you have to do something. It depends on you. It gives a certain responsibility to the reader. So if the reader is witnessing event as directly as they can, it gives the responsibility as in to choose what to happen and what not to happen during that story. So that is one of the advantages of this viewpoint. So that is, it is also the reason why it is mostly used in visual novels, right? Now, the second positive point is like it could have interactive elements. So if you have second person perspective, you could have a lot of interactive elements in it, such as you could have instructions or prompts that encourage readers to actively like participate in the story. So visual novels is basically the go-to thing for this second person perspective. It also like offers opportunities for like experimentation and creative storytelling. So like you can be the person who is like telling the story to the player in a very you know quirky manner also. Like you could try that. So if you're telling the story, if you're telling the story in a quirky manner, the whole environment of that visual novel actually changes to a quirky scenario, a quirky environment basically. So yeah, you could try those experimentation with this second person narrative. Right. Now the disadvantage is that it may not be suitable for all type of stories or genres. Right. Like if you're making something like a detective story, so it could fit with the detective story, but let's say suppose if you're like writing a horror story and you want to like you know express the fears and the desires of the character, what they are experiencing during that horror visual novel. So it will be a little bit off-putting, as in it will not actually engage the reader to be that much uh, you know horrified by that horror story, because you're telling them to like see this and see that, but you're not actually forming the feelings which a reader should feel. So it depends on the user how they feel. So it may not click with the horror stories. Basically, the disadvantage is that in this second person perspective. So yeah, this is one of the disadvantages. Now the second one is that it relies heavily on reader's response and interpretation. So the second person perspective is like it is very dependent on the reader itself, as in how they will interpret the story and what choices they will do. So if you want to like have this uh, if you want to like have a certain feeling which should be there in all the routes, so you cannot have that in the second person perspective. It also like limits the opportunities for like exploring the characters or the viewpoints. So um, basically, because you are telling the story from second person perspective, it actually limits to see like what other characters are experiencing and what other viewpoints you could include, as in not from what the player chooses to choose. So suppose as if you're making a visual novel, every person will actually experience different things depending on what choices they choose on the second person perspective. So they will not get the general feel of what the story is for the visual novel. So now the example of this is like these are some of the examples, right? So let's read on the examples. So this is the first example. You wake up in a dark room, disoriented and confused. The concrete floor is cold on your cheek and the air is stale. A sense of dread washes over you as you try to remember where you are and how you got here. Your heart races as you realize you are not alone. Someone else is breathing in darkness. So this is like you see, uh, this is actually calling for the reader to experience this, right? Now, What happens here is like if the user is not if the user is disconnected from the story, they would not actually like really feel that, because when you are presenting it as yourself, you are actually viewing from their eyes, so that is the first person perspective. But if you are like saying that you are feeling that, you are not feeling that. So it is like it depends on the reader to make a choice, like, do I really feel this? I'm just observing this and he's telling me to that I feel this, but I really don't feel this. That happens in here. And then the second example is like you look into the video window and see the rain pouring down the droplets streaking the glass. You feel a pang of loneliness as you watch the world outside. The streets are deserted, save for the occasional car splashing through the puddles, headlights reflecting off the wet pavement. So this is also like you're not actually telling what a reader should feel. You are just describing what is happening around around him. What is happening around him or her, around the player. So yeah. So what is happening around them? You just describe that, right? Now this is a simple another simple exercise you can try out. So this is the another exercise. So this is the passage here. You walk down the street, and you walk down the deserted street, and the sound of your footsteps echoing in the silence. You can't shake the feeling that someone or something is watching you. So this is you could extend on this and see like how you could write in second person perspective. This is a little bit of exercise you could try and do. Pause the video and just try to expand this passage and see how it goes. Okay, now there is one more is like third person omniscient narration. Now the third person omniscient narration is usually used in animes. Yeah, it is used in animes and it is used in shows. So in old animes or in animes of 2000s, like 2000 to 2010, it is the third person omniscient narration was used in many of the anime. So if you're like inspired, like if you're inspired to like portray the visual novel story as anime show, or like the 2000 to 2010s animations, you could use this third person omniscient. This is also like used in most of the novels as well. So let's see what it is. So in narrative perspective, where the narrator has all the knowing viewpoints, so like they have all the knowing viewpoints, so you could switch between the characters, like and tell them like how they are, what they are doing, what they're not doing. So it is omniscient, right? So it is the all knowing viewpoint, and we use third person pronouns for this. It is it's like he, she, they, or them. Like we use this third person pronouns. Another thing which we have to understand in here, that this type of narrator can see, understand everything happening in the story, including the thoughts, feelings, and motivations of all the characters. So if you want to show thoughts, feelings, and motivations of all the characters, then you can use this third person omniscient narration. So this is one of the narrative style is used when you have to show thoughts, feelings, motivations of all the characters in the story. And even when you want to show things which is not related to the main character, you could use this third person omniscient narration. So the omniscient narrator is not limited to by time, space, and can provide a reader with comprehensive, multifaceted understanding of the narrative. So you could like with the third person omniscient narration, you're not limited to any time or space, right? So it is not like you cannot go back to any time, or you cannot go ahead in any time or switch places between them. So you can mix and merge the time frames in omniscient narration. So that is one of the advantage in in third person omniscient narration, right? So the advantages and the disadvantages we can see in here, like what is the advantages and the disadvantages in here. So the advantage is that you have the access of thoughts, feelings, and motivations of all the characters and all the events which is happening in the story, and whatever time you want to look into. So it allows for a complete and nuanced understanding of the story and characters. Now, the second advantage of this point is of this narration is that the narrator can shift focus between different characters, providing multiple perspectives, events, and relationships and narratives. So yeah, as I said before, it could provide different and multiple perspectives and relationships and feelings of every character. This has the most flexibility. Like the third person omniscient narrative has the most flexibility in writing the story. So you will get everything. Like you can get every point of view when writing that this visual novel. It has all the flexibility you can get in here. You can move freely in any time and space, and without being limited to any single character's experience, or even the player's perspective. You are not even limited to the player's perspective, so you can actually have control on what the player is feeling this again. Now, the disadvantage of this is like this is a very broad perspective and can make it difficult for the reader to form a very deep connection. So if you are showing from multiple different angles and different perspective and showing an omniscient way of storytelling, so this will basically have lesser deep connection with a single character in your story, because the focus is actually shifting frequently. So you have very less deep connection with a single character. So so it depends on the user which character they have their favorite, right? Now, there is also the fact that there is abundance of information which might like overwhelm the readers or the players, especially if there are many characters, thoughts, and backstories that are introduced at once. So if you have many backstories or thoughts of various characters, it could overwhelm the readers. But avid readers actually, you know, soak in this information. So if there is some avid reader, they will actually soak in this information. Those who are not those in-depth readers, they won't. Uh, they will be overwhelmed by the amount of information you present as a third-person omniscient narrator. Now, in this, since the narrator knows everything, the element of surprise and discovery that actually goes out of the picture, right? So the element of surprise and discovery that the reader experiences, that actually uh, very very diminished. So for a horror game, or let's say suppose a detective game, uh, it will not work well for it will not work well in this kind of perspective, right? Now, this is some of the example which I have written in here. So let's see. So this is the first example. As the city lights flicker to life, casting long shadows along the crowded street, Detective Martins leans against the lamppost, his fedora pulled over his eyes. Little did he know, the key to solving the city's latest string of unsolved murders lay hidden in an abandoned warehouse just blocks away. Meanwhile, the penthouse suite of the luxury-rise apartment, the elusive socialite, Every Davis sipped her champagne, her cozy gaze fixed on the glittering skyline as he plotted her next move. So, see, in here it is like this is revolving around detective and Avery. This is another character. So this is the omniscient third person omniscient narrative, right? So that is what is happening. So there is, even if you want to write a story like when a detective is solving some story, so if you so this doesn't so this information, as in like the murders are happening in this abandoned warehouse just blocks away, if you're giving that information, then this is not a very um, engaging detective story, because you're giving the information directly. So this doesn't fits with it, right? Now the next is like, hold on. Mm, yeah. So now next is next example is this, right? In the bustling market square of village, Mrs. Wilson set up her stall. She wrinkled hands, expertly arranging fresh fruits and vegetables. Little did she know, her prized heirloom tomatoes would catch the eye of renowned chef Alfredo Torres, who happened to be passing through his culinary quest for perfect ingredients. Meanwhile, across the square, young Jamie eagerly practiced his juggling routine, dreaming of joining a traveling circus. So again, this is again the omniscient narrative. So third person omniscient narrative. So when you are writing the plot, you could use this type of thing if you want to have this kind of perspective. So now there is a little bit of exercise which I have given for the viewer. You could pause the video and try this out. So this is the starting of the paragraph. In the sprawling countryside estate, Lord Hamilton reclined his velvet armchair, the crackling fire casting warm glow over the opulent library, unbeknownst to him, his loyal butler Richard. And now you could continue what this narrative goes out to be, right? So you could practice this and see how your um, writing skills goes. Okay. Now, now this is the fourth one, which is the third person limited narration. Now, what happens here is a bit different. And here, the information is not uh, given so rapidly to you in this one. So in this, let's see what it is. A narrative viewpoint where the narrator tells a story from the perspective of one character. And so if you want to switch perspectives from one character to another character, you use third person limited narration. And the good thing about this is that it focuses closely on the character's thoughts, feelings, and experiences. So you could change from one character to another character, and you will go with that person's thoughts, feelings, conflicts on whatever they are experiencing and their point of view. But the thing is, what we use here is we use third person pronouns in here, such as he, she, they, them. We use these kind of pronouns. Unlike the third person omniscient narration, which has access to all thoughts, feelings of all the characters, the third person limited stays closely aligned with one character. So in this, the third person limited perspective is you're closely aligned with one character at a time and their internal world, offering you are offering you're offering a more intimate and focused perspective at a time when you're using third person limited perspective, limited narration, right? Now let's see what are the advantages and the disadvantages of it. So the reader or the player develops a strong connection with the focal character. So whatever whichever character you choose for the time being to show the point of view, the reader actually develops a very strong character with it, and it gives a deep insight into the inner world and emotional experiences. Now, the second point is the narrators has limited uh, knowledge that can create with this. Since the narrator is actually explaining things from a point of view of a single character at a time, this can help in creating suspense and mystery as the reader discover the events and the information along with them. So this is very helpful in creating a certain kind of suspense and a mystery, right? Now, the third advantageous point of this is it offers a balance between broad scope of third person omniscient and deep immersion of the first person, providing both external and internal perspective. So this is basically, you're not limited to a first person perspective, so you don't get those all biased views or one-sided view of the things, but you're not also not getting that omniscient view of knowing everything and what is happening and where it is happening at the same time. What you are showing is you are giving a balance between the broad scope of the third person omniscient and a deep immersion of the first person perspective. So you have that balance in this third person limited narrative, right? Disadvantage is that the narrative is limited to the experiences and knowledge of the chosen character. So again, in this, you have the disadvantage of you cannot say things of the other person when you have when he had chosen to show the story from one character's perspective at the time. You have to like change the perspective with other scenes or like adding a new chapter or something like that. So that is omitting important insights from others as well, right? So it is not giving the omniscient viewpoint of the story. Now, the second disadvantage is that the story is colored by focal characters' perception and biases. So again, the story is basically biased by whatever character you choose for the time being, for that scene or for that place. Whatever character you choose to like portray a story from, it is uh, it is the story is biased from the perceptions of what that character feels. So it offers like a subjective feeling of all the events, which limits the reader in understanding like what is the objective truth of it, right? So this is the limitation. It could be used also as an advantage, like you could use this thing to like engage the user in like choosing all the choices of a visual novels because they want to know like what is the objective truth of the story. Now, there is also like transitions, like in shifting from one character's narrative can be challenging to execute smoothly. Like to change from one character to another character's perspective, this may disrupt the flow. So this changing the perspective actually, breaks a lot of basically an elegance of the story if it is not done properly, right? Now, these are the few of the examples of third person limited perspective, right? These are some of the examples which I have written. So let's see what we can do in here. So Kimberly sat by the window, her fingers tracing the faded photograph in her hand as tears welled up in her eyes. With heavy sigh, she wiped them away. She had spent years searching for the answers, and she refused to give up now. As she studied the photograph, that small glimmer of hope reignited within her. So this is like a third person perspective, but this is a third person limited perspective. So I'm focusing on Kimberly in here. Now this is you could extend on this and like try to see what happens from there. Now this is the second one. So um, second point of view, right? So Daniel paced back and forth in bustling hospital corridor, the knot of worry tightening his chest with each step. With every second, his fears for the daughter grew more intense, growing at him relentlessly. He longed to hold her, to offer reassurance, but he knew he had to stay strong for her sake. So this is again, I'm focusing on this character Daniel and trying to portray that, uh, you know, portray that perspective, third person limited perspective, with his point of view. This is the practice turn in here. This is your turn now. I've written the starting of this passage. Now you try to complete this passage and see how it forms. So this is the passage. Rachel found herself seated at her usual table in quaint cafe on corner, her fingers tapping worn wooden sur- anxiously on the worn wooden surface. Each glance at her phone brought a flicker of hope, followed by a sinking feeling of disappointment. So you see, this is I'm focusing on Rachel. So try to see like where you can get with this passage and what you can portray in this passage. Okay. Now there is one more thing which is the multiple narrative perspectives. So this is very experimental, I must say. This is very experimental, and to like employ this, you have to have a very good skills in like narration, basically. So this is actually happening in modern animes and even modern like you will see there's Wattpad, the amateur Wattpad writers, they are utilizing this multiple narrative perspectives. So and even in some experimental visual novels, the new visual novels you are seeing this multiple narrative perspectives. So what happens in here? Let's understand this. Sometimes the story is told from viewpoints of multiple narratives, either from switching between the characters in first person or third person point of view, right? So this is the most difficult point. This is difficult way to like narrate the story. you're switching from first person to third person point of view, and even from third person to second person point of view. So this is the multiple narrative perspective. So most of the experiments which I've seen is like first person to third person point of view, right? But it is very difficult to have that continuous flow of the story. Like this is very difficult to implement in the story, especially for the visual novels. And the narrative technique allows the user to see different perspectives and angles on one character's event, sometimes positioning them to re-evaluate the story the way they perceive the elements within the story. So if you are switching from third person to first person, or even the third person omniscient to third person limited narrative, what you're saying, like you could revisit the previous scenes of previous events with different perspective, and like re-evaluate thing like what you're doing. And this usually is useful like when you're ending the story, or showing something which is like a way to like clarify what happened actually in the story before ending the game. So this is a very experimental one. We can use this, employ this in a very controlled way. Yeah, if you're going if you're abusing this method, the story will be uh, very it will not have the proper flow which a story should have, right? So now you have to now you understand like different point of views, right? Now you understand different point of views. Now you have to analyze like what point of view you have to consider while writing the story. Now in here, which I have what I have written, let's see this. Considering the author's choice of narrative viewpoint depends our understanding of the story's construction and meaning. So, whatever the author's choice of narrative viewpoint he or she or they chooses is actually this actually depends the understanding of the story construction and meaning behind it. So, yeah, yeah, you have to like see what point of view the story is being told. And by examining who tells the story and how they tell it, and from what perspective, we gain the insight of the characters' experiences, motivations, and relationships. So when you are reading a story, like which point of view they are telling the story, so you then understand like what are the characters' experiences, what are the motivations or relationships, or what the author is trying to convey to you, right? So what the author is trying to convey to you, what the author is trying to teach to you, or what the author is trying to um, you know uh, tell his experiences to you, right? So that actually we understand by analyzing the point of view of the story. The narrative viewpoint also shapes the character interpretation of the events, influencing our empathy, characters, and our perceptions of themes and messages. So whatever the narrative is actually is also like shapes what is the interpretation of the events, and uh, to which things we feel empathy for and to which things we do not. Suppose if you have a certain narrative which is like showing the feelings of the villain of the story, then you could like empathize. So you could show empathy with the villain itself, even though that villain is doing a lot of bad things. So yeah, that is like you could analyze the point of view of the story to see what it is happening in there. Uh, this is the passage which you have to read, right? So you can pause the video and read this passage. So here is expert from this Moby Dick. So this is a very old book. So written in 1851. So this is an expert from there. So try to like see what is um, what is, try to answer the questions after reading this passage. I will read it for you. Call me Ishmael. Some years ago, never mind how long precisely, having little or no money in my purse and nothing particular to interest me on shore, I thought I would sail about a little and see what watery part of the world. See the watery part of the world. It is a way I have of driving off the spleen and regulating the circulation. Whenever I find myself growing grim about the mouth, whenever it is damp, drizzly, November in my soul. whenever I find myself involuntarily pausing before the coffin warehouses and bringing up the rear of the every funeral I meet, and especially whenever my hypos get such an upper hand of me that it requires a strong moral principle to prevent me from deliberately stepping into the street and methodically knocking people's hats off. Then I accounted high time to get to see as soon as I can. This is my substitute for pistol and ball. So this is an expert from from Moby Dick, basically, right? So now these are the questions. Try to answer, like, if you could answer these questions or not. The first question is, try to understand, like, from what perspective is the story is told, right? The second is like how might this choice in narrative viewpoint influence your experience in the story, like how it will how it is influencing your viewpoint of the viewpoint of the how this viewpoint narrative is influencing your experiences of the story. Try to understand this, right? And then the third is like what details you could discern from this narrative about the narrator from this passage, like what details you can gather from it, right? Try to understand this. And the fourth point is that how would you describe the unique voice and style of the passage, right? So once you identify the narration, what type of narration it is, you try to describe like what is the unique voice or style of the passage in this. You would have like if you have read it properly, you would have understand like it has a unique style. So like what kind of style it is, like, you can understand, you can describe it in here. And the fifth one, we have to like understand like what language features contribute to this voice. So what are the nuances of the languages or the style of the language they are using for that for that passage, right? This is another passage, which is this is an expert from um, a novel called Anna Karenina, and this is by Lloyd Tolstoy. It was written in 1877, so it is a very old book. So let's understand this as well, right? So let's read the passage. Happy families are all alike. Every unhappy family is unhappy in its own way. Everything was in confusion in Oblonsky's house. The wife had discovered that the husband was carrying on an intrigue with a French girl who had been governess in their family, and she announced to her husband that she could not go on living in the same house with him. The position of affairs had now lasted 3 days, and not only the husband and the wife themselves, but all the members of the family and household were painfully conscious of it. Every person in the house felt that there was no sense in their living together, and that the stray people brought together by chance in any inn had more in common than one another than the members of the family had, that the family and the household of the Albo- Albonskis. So yeah, uh, this is the passage, right? So the questions is you could ask like from reading this previous slide, right? Like this one, this passage. Okay. Once you read the passage, you could pause the video and read the passage on yourself. That will be better, right? So the questions you should ask from this while reading the passage is like, from what perspective is the story told, right? So what is the perspective the story? You have to first identify that. Now, second is like how this narrative viewpoint is influencing your story. The third point is like the same thing, like how do you discern the characters about this passage? Like what could you figure out of the characters of this passage? The fourth one is like, could you understand the voice or the style of the passage? Like what kind of style of passage is it? You have to like describe it and tell and write it down or something. And then figure out like what is the language feature that contributes to device. What is the language feature that is used in contributing to this voice? So you can understand it. Uh, there are some key points to consider while writing visual novels. The first thing is that you should try to reduce the mundane things of the story, right? You should try to reduce the mundane things of the story. And if you have to write the mundane things, if you have to write the mundane things of the story, you have to either describe it visually or with the feelings of the narrator or the player, right? So as you have read in the previous passages and the previous excerpts, previous passages that I've given of different novels or the what I have written, the mundane things of the story is basically either described visually or with the feelings of the player. If you are writing mundane things, if you are writing mundane things, try to describe those mundane things with visually or with the feelings of the narrator. The third thing is like whatever choice you take in the visual novel, right? Whatever choice you take in the visual novel, the world events of the visual novel stays the same. The only thing which changes is like how it pans out. So there are certain world events which is outside control of the of whatever characters you have chosen or uh, whatever story you are portraying. So there is a scope of the story in the visual novel, right? And that scope of the story is that what it controls with it. So things which is outside the story, which is world events, which is beyond the control of the story, it always happens. But what happens is like how that event will happen, but how even that will pan out for those for that story, that is depending on the choices what the visual novel player has chosen, right? So the world events is like, suppose if you are writing suppose um, a visual novel of like let's say sci-fi visual novel, right? Now there is a world event that is going to happen is like asteroid will hit the earth. Now this will happen in any case you want, right? This thing will happen. This is outside the control of the story because it is a world event. The asteroid is going to hit the earth, right? But you could change like how this event will be managed. Whether these sci-fi futuristic people make something a rocket or something to like deviate the asteroid from its trajectory path, or they move on to different planets such as Mars, and this world event happens. Now, again, I'm using the sci-fi and the world part too literally here. You could like happen in like in a smaller context as well. Suppose if the story is going on in a university or something, and the world event is going to happen is like the university is going to like stop getting funding for the research, right? This is going to happen, right? This is the world event. But whatever the characters of the story, which is basically they are the research students of the story, research students, these characters are research students in that visual novel. What they will do to handle this thing that the university is like not getting grants for the research and like to pay for the research students. This is the world event. So how they will manage is like that is you have to that could be changed with whatever choices the visual novel users take, but not but they cannot change the world events themselves, right? They cannot stop the world event, or they cannot nullify the world event. They can change how that world event will pan out. Now, the fourth point is that major diversions or the routes which you have decided can be created by creating variations, polarity, and intensity of various choices. So, like whatever alternative choices you use, like once you have decided the core feeling of not a core feeling, but the end feeling of the game, whatever the end feeling you have decided for the game, you could change the polarity in different routes, or you could change the intensity of that feeling in different diversions or different routes, right? So that is you could do that with this. And one of the thing which you have to consider that every route ending should have a moral lesson to learn. So if you are not giving a moral lesson to learn, at the end of the story, the whole story will lose its meaning after a certain point of time. because at the point when you give that moral lesson, like if that story gives you a moral lesson, it gives impact on the reader's memory, that they will remember it forever, or at least for a considerable amount of time, which actually brings much more loyalty to the visual novel. And maybe they will, like, read your next visual novel as well. So these five things, you have key points you have to consider, right? Now, the last thing which you have to show, like, how you will write the story of visual novels, right? How you will write the story of the visual novels. Now, usually some of the writers will suggest you, or the visual novel makers suggest you, to write in one document, and then do other things, and then like branch out from there, and like write the canon route, or the main route, and then branch out from there, right? But if you are doing that, you will actually miss out. You will actually, when you're writing that like that, you will actually write a novel rather than visual novel. That happens if you write it in a single document. That will happen when you are writing in a single document, that you will write it in a way which is like a novel, but not in a visual novel. So, you wouldn't have enough space to make choices themselves. So, but if you are like writing in the game engine itself, such as the Rentai game engine, or other game engines, such as, um, there is another game engine called Pine, which is for a visual novel game engine. So if you are writing in the game engine itself, it could provide a better flexibility, but it will also, like, uh, you know motivate you in a wrong path, as in, like, to make too many choices for what you cannot handle, right? So that is, for if you're writing directly in a visual novel game engine, you will have too many choices to handle. So there is a bit of a balance which you can do in here. Is like, I'll show you. Hold on. I'll show you. Like, this is the current project which is I'm working on. This is the Lois playbook. So this is the plot in here. The plot stays in one document. You could write it in different document as well, like you could split the document itself. But the main story, like, the main you could do this for the plot itself. I haven't done this for the plot because I have figured out this technique at later stage, after we have gotten the plot, basically. So, like, you write the scene wise, or you write the chapter wise in one document. So, like, one scene or one chapter is one document, two, three, four, five, like so. You number these documents scene wise or the chapter wise. Now, when in a certain scene or a chapter, there is an option to me, right? So, like, say you have two options, choice one and choice two. Then you create a folder. Inside the folder which you have all the scenes, and then you have this choice one story, and then you have choice two story. So this is your divergent route, basically. So this is where this happens when this choice one is selected, and these scenes happens when choice two is selected. Now, you could also go deep into this, such as, once you have gotten choice two, then you have, like, some choice in scene 13. So suppose this example, in this example, and you have, like, choice two one and choice two two. So basically, this is choice two, and then in the choice two, choice one, or choice two. So you have to then, like, whatever choice you do, the different scenes will uh, pan out from there. Like, this is the scene. This is choices two one sequence, and this is the choices two sequence. So you could write the story in this fashion. You could use the um, the visual code, or any other editor you could use to manage all these things, right? Which could open multiple files at once. You could use any editor, right? So Visual Studio Code is like, it could manage a lot of files in one go. So I suggest to use Visual Studio Code for this, and write the documents in Markdown format. Yeah. So, yeah, this is all the things which I have to like tell you about. These are the basic guidelines of like writing a story for a visual novel. You know, this is the basically all the information which I have, all the guidelines and the tips which I have regarding how to write a good visual novel story. So hopefully you will write a good novel story after watching this video. If you have come across this video, because I don't think a lot of people who come across this video to begin with. So yeah, um, have a great day then.